self-determination, independence, and their right to live in peace within the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as capital.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
cada vez somos más países que reconocemos al Estado de Palestina. Saludamos el reciente anuncio de Bahamas y Trinidad y Tobago, reconociendo oficialmente a Palestina como Estado. Ya somos 144 estados en estos últimos días. Nuestra América Latina y Caribeña, nuestra zona de paz, siempre ha sido firme en su lucha anticolonial y en apoyar la autodeterminación de los pueblos. 32 de los 33 estados de nuestra región ya reconocen al Estado de Palestina y esperamos que muy pronto el último estado pendiente anuncie su reconocimiento al Estado de Palestina. Estados Unidos y países europeos tienen la obligación moral e histórica de reconocer y respetar al Estado libre, independiente y soberano de Palestina, a los gobiernos y pueblos de la región y del mundo que exigen convivir con seguridad común para todos, estabilidad y paz, con el Estado palestino formando parte de Naciones Unidas. Escuchen las voces de la humanidad entera que claman por paz, justicia, por una Palestina libre, que pongan fin a sus injustificables políticas de negación y exclusión de los derechos inalienables del pueblo palestino. Nicaragua no cesará su incondicional apoyo a Palestina y junto a la comunidad internacional continuaremos todo esfuerzo e iniciativa necesaria para avanzar en la cuestión de Palestina hasta alcanzar la liberación de Palestina. Liberación que prevalezca la vida, liberación para que prevalezca la paz. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nicaragua. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Mr. President, my delegation thanks you for convening today's plenary meeting following the joint request by the Arab Group, Non-Aligned Movement, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Malaysia aligns itself with the NAM and OIC statements and adds the following remarks in its national capacity. Mr. President, after more than 7 decades since the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 181 in 1947, which partitioned Palestinians' land into Arab and Jewish states, Palestinians continue to be denied their right to statehood. In contrast, Israel was accepted as a full member in 1949. Since then, the world has been witnessing turmoil and bloodshed in the land of Palestine. For 7 decades, Israel's illegal, brutal, and inhumane occupation has dispossessed Palestinians of their lands, properties, rights, and dignity. It has taken the lives of countless numbers of innocent men, women, and children, and continue to do so to this day. The current hostilities in Gaza are the latest episode in the already long history of Palestinian struggle under Israeli occupation. After about 7 months of relentless Israeli military onslaught, more than 35,000 deaths have been recorded, about 70% of whom are women and children. That is nearly 15,000 children and 10,000 women killed. The discoveries of mass graves in the compounds of Al-Shifa and Nasser hospitals are deeply concerning. The numbers of deaths among humanitarian workers and media personnel have also reached new records. The level of destruction of civilian infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, and UN premises, is unprecedented. The unrelenting destruction of Gaza and catastrophic humanitarian condition of its inhabitants are downright appalling. And despite warnings of disastrous humanitarian consequences, Israel remains adamant to mount a ground military assault of Rafah. The carnage in Gaza must stop. The international community must demand proper accountability processes, starting with thorough transparent, and independent international investigations on all breaches of international law, including possible acts of war crime and genocide in Gaza. Mr. President, the question of Palestine must be resolved once and for all. Israel's occupation must end. Justice must be restored. The self-determination of the Palestinian people must be upheld. The fully sovereign state of Palestine must be recognized. For those of us who still remember the misery of life under occupation or colonization and the bitter struggle of our forefathers for independence and statehood, it is our responsibility to support Palestinian statehood. It is our collective moral duty to do everything we can to ensure that the state of Palestine take its rightful place as our equal in this august chamber. The fundamental United Nations founding principle of equality among nations must be extended to the state of Palestine without any discrimination nor further delay. Malaysia's support towards Palestinian statehood and its membership to the United Nations is long-standing. We hold the view that the admission of the State of Palestine as a full member should have happened when General Assembly Resolution 181 was adopted and Israel was admitted 75 years ago. The resolution adopted by the Assembly last Friday is a significant step forward. It is a much-needed positive development in the face of the Security Council's continued politicization and paralysis. The adoption of the text by an overwhelming majority is a clear testament of the enormous support for the Palestinian statehood within the international community. Malaysia shares the view that the State of Palestine meets the 4 criteria for statehood outlined in the 1933 Montevideo Convention. We also firmly believe that the State of Palestine fulfills the conditions for membership to the United Nations as laid out in Article 4 of the Charter. Palestine has consistently demonstrated that it is committed to peace, even as Israel persists with its brutal and oppressive occupation, continues to erode its territorial integrity, and attempts to annihilate the Palestinian people. It is also clear to us that Palestine highly values the opportunities to participate in UN processes, and it is able and willing to carry out obligations enshrined in the Charter. Palestine has beyond doubt proven itself worthy of membership of this organization. In contrast, Israel continues to breach international law, defy UN resolutions, as well as vilify and malign the United Nations and its officials. Israel's actions, which each passing day inevitably raise our doubts if it actually believes in the UN system and values its membership in this organization. The offensive gimmick of shredding the UN Charter we witnessed in this chamber last Friday is just another example of Israel's utter disrespect of the United Nations. Ironically, it is Israel's credibility that is being shredded to pieces through their contempt for international law and norms. No cheap theatrics will ever deny the resounding support for the resolution, as well as the enduring relevance of the Charter's principles and aspirations. Mr. President, assertions that the State of Palestine does not meet the criteria for membership set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter are absurd and quite suspicious. Such allegations are blatant rejection of General Assembly and Security Council resolutions that have recognized Palestine as a state. To date, 144 members of the United Nations have recognized the State of Palestine, and several countries have announced their intention of recognizing Palestine in the very near future. We encourage those who have not officially recognized Palestine to do so without further delay. Mr. President, the question of Palestine has remained an outstanding issue in this organization for more than 7 decades. It is high time that the UN deliver on its duty and responsibility and produce a just, lasting, and peaceful solution to the question of Palestine. This should start with the recognition of the State of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with the internationally recognized two-state solution. We, the independent and sovereign member states of the United Nations, must not renege on our commitment to uphold the United Nations principle of equality among nations. We must not fail our Palestinian brothers and sisters in their struggle for self-determination. We must not forget, most of us here were once in their shoes. Palestinians too deserve to live in peace, to develop, and to prosper. We shall not and must not succumb to the pressure of those who seek to undermine peace in the Middle East. We call on all member states to be united and support efforts towards lasting peace in the Middle East. The full membership of the State of Palestine of the United Nations is a critical step towards this end. Malaysia stands ready to be part of and support initiatives aimed at realizing the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to freedom and self-determination. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Malaysia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, allow me to thank you for resuming the 10th Emergency Special Session of the General Assembly. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by the UAE on behalf of the Arab Group, Mauritania on behalf of the OIC, and Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, we welcome the adoption by the General Assembly last Friday of Resolution A/ES-RES-10/23 with 143 states voting favorably on the eligibility of the Palestinian state to be granted full membership at the United Nations, and on recommending that the Security Council reconsider the matter favorably and grant Palestine additional privileges and rights regarding its participation in this international organization. We stress the need for diplomatic and humanitarian efforts to support the legitimate historic rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, freedom, justice, equality, independence, and ending the occupation in line with international law. We reaffirm that the full international acknowledgement of the full international recognition of the Palestinian state and its membership at the United Nations is a political and legal right. It is inalienable and a legitimate historic right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as a capital based on the two-state solution in line with the resolutions of international legitimacy, the Arab Peace Initiative, and this is a major step to promote just, sustainable, and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. Mr. President, we condemn the Israeli military operations on Rafah, the last safe haven for more than 1 million Palestinian people. We condemned its control over the Rafah land crossing in southern Gaza. We warned against the dangerous repercussions of that on innocent civilians. We once again call upon the international community and influential parties at the Security Council to immediately and urgently interfere to ensure a humanitarian truce and to stop any military expansion to protect peace and security regionally. In conclusion, it is important to continue supporting the Palestinian people so that they can be granted their legitimate national rights. It is important to support every effort to ensure ensure a ceasefire in Gaza, the delivery of humanitarian assistance to civilians, and launching a serious and genuine political process to ensure sustainable and comprehensive peace in the region in order to establish an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as a capital on the basis of the two-state solution and based on the resolutions of international legitimacy, the Arab Peace Initiative, and granting Palestine full membership at the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bahrain. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, thank you for resuming the 10th Emergency Special Session at the request of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Arab League, and non-allied movement groups. This august body, the General Assembly, as the most representative organ of the United Nations, has expressed the collective stance of the international community by adopting the resolution on Palestine's admission as a member to the United Nations with 143 positive votes. Turkey is proud to have co-sponsored this historic resolution. The adoption of this resolution not only marks a significant milestone in Palestine's pursuit of statehood, but also highlights the growing disparity between the Security Council and the collective voice of the international community. Mr. President, 7 months into the conflict, the dire situation in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank persists. The Palestinian people are brutally targeted with total disregard of the international law and international humanitarian law. The recent escalations, the recent attacks in Rafah, as well as the wider region, are deeply worrying. The discovery of mass graves in Gaza underscores the severity of the situation. People in Gaza are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. UNRWA, the backbone of the humanitarian operations in Gaza, is under political and physical attack. Disrupting UNRWA's work would not only exacerbate the suffering, but also destabilize the entire region. Despite this unprecedented humanitarian tragedy, the inability to halt bloodshed and man-made famine in Gaza is deplorable and shameful. Mr. President, since the conflict's onset, the international community's demands have been clear: an immediate ceasefire, unimpeded humanitarian aid, and end to forced displacement. 2 resolutions adopted by this august body, as well as the Security Council Resolution 2728, calling for a ceasefire, have not been implemented yet. The provisional measures by the International Court of Justice, Security Council resolutions on humanitarian aid, and fundamental principles of international law are disregarded. The gravest violations of the UN Charter is taking place before our own eyes in Gaza. This has been coupled with the attempts to insult the UN and its charter under this roof. It is our duty as the international community to make sure that this lawlessness and impunity comes to an end. We call on the Security Council to take swift action, starting with an immediate ceasefire. The brutality and the bloodshed in Gaza have persisted for too long. This must end now, and its recurrence must be prevented through a durable two-state solution. A two-state solution offers the sole prospect of breaking the cycle of violence. Mr. President, Turkey supports the application of Palestine for its admission as a full member of the United Nations. This step will enable Palestinians to achieve their aspirations for statehood, sovereignty, and independence, fostering momentum for a two-state solution, which is the only way to serve through justice. Palestine deserves to be a full member and to be treated as an equal member of the international community. Security Council resolutions envision a region where two states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side within secure and recognized borders. The longer this vision is deferred, the longer the region will be pushed into vicious circles of violence and destruction. With the adoption of this resolution, the wider membership has determined that the state of Palestine is qualified for membership in the United Nations and recommended that the Security Council reconsider the matter favorably. The overwhelming majority in the Security Council is already in favor. We urge the Security Council to take concrete steps toward realizing a political solution based on the two-state vision and pre-67 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of an independent, sovereign, and contiguous state of Palestine. In conclusion, I welcome the Palestinian delegation to participate in the works of this assembly. Thank you, Mr. President, and all delegations voted for this resolution.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lebanon.
السيد الرئيس،
Mr. President,
أتوجه إليكم بالشكر على
I thank
عقد
you for
هذه
convening
الجلسة.
this session.
يؤيد لبنان
Lebanon
البيان
aligns
الذي
itself with
أدلى
the
به
statement
وفد
delivered
الإمارات
by
العربية
the United Arab
المتحدة
Emirates
نيابة
on
عن
behalf
المجموعة
of the
العربية.
Arab group.
السيد الرئيس،
Mr. President,
يرحب لبنان
Lebanon
بتبني
welcomes
الجمعية
the
العامة
General Assembly
للقرار
adoption
المتعلق
of
بقبول أعضاء جدد في
resolution on
الأمم
admission of
المتحدة.
new members to the UN.
لقد أنصفت
Through this
الجمعية العامة
long-awaited
فلسطين
resolution, the General
وإن طال
Assembly has done
الانتظار
right by Palestine
بالإقرار
by
بحقها
recognizing
بأخذ
its
مكانها
right to
الطبيعي
take
بين
its
الأمم،
rightful place among nations,
وحسمت
and
النقاش
concluded
حول
the
أهليتها
discussion regarding its
لعضوية الأمم المتحدة
eligibility for UN
وفقا
membership
للمادة
in
الرابعة
accordance
من
with
ميثاق
Article
الأمم
4
المتحدة.
of the UN Charter.
يبقى أن
It is
ينصت
up
مجلس
now
الأمن
for
إلى
the
هذا
Security
القرار
Council to
الواضح
listen to this
والجلي
clear resolution
الصادر عن
by
الجمعية
the General
العامة،
Assembly,
وأن يعيد
and to
النظر في طلب
reconsider
عضوية
Palestine's
فلسطين بشكل
application
إيجابي ودون
positively
تأخير.
and without delay.
ف75 عاما من
75
الانتظار
years
كافية.
is a long time.
السيد الرئيس،
Mr. President,
ينص القرار على
the
تعزيز
resolution
مشاركة
calls for
دولة
strengthening
فلسطين
Palestine's
في دورات
participation
وأعمال
in
الجمعية
sessions and
العامة
works of the General
والمؤتمرات
Assembly,
الدولية
international conferences
التي تعقد
that
تحت
are
رعاية
convened
الجمعية أو
under the
الأجهزة
auspices
الأخرى
of the General
التابعة
Assembly
للأمم
or other
المتحدة.
organs of the UN.
ونرى في ذلك
We see
تأكيدا من
in this
الجمعية
a
العامة
reiteration
على
by the
قدرة
General Assembly
فلسطين
that Palestine
على
is
التفاعل
capable
الإيجابي
to
في
engage
الأمم
positively
المتحدة
within
ومع
the
الدول
UN and
الأعضاء
with the member states.
في إطار تعزيز مقاصد
the
وغايات الأمم المتحدة
process
ومنها
of strengthening
التسامح
the
والعيش
principles
في
and goals of
سلام
the
وحسن
UN,
الجوار،
including tolerance,
وضم
living
إرادتها
in peace
إلى
and good
إرادة
neighborly
المجتمع الدولي
relations, and
لحفظ
join its
السلم
will
والأمن
with the
الدوليين.
international community to
السيد الرئيس،
maintain international peace and
يكرر
security.
التعبير
We
عن
reiterate
الأسف
our deep
الشديد
regret for the
لعدم تمكن
inability of the
المجلس
Council
في
on the
18 من
18th
نيسان
of
الماضي
April
من تمرير
to
مشروع
adopt a
القرار
draft
المقدم من
resolution
الجزائر
tabled by Algeria
والذي يوصي
recommending
بمنح
the
فلسطين
granting
عضوية
of
كاملة
full
في
membership
هذه
to
المنظمة،
Palestine.
ونحثه
We
على
urge the
مراجعة
Council
موقفه
to
بأسرع
reconsider
وقت.
its position as
ونرى
soon as
أن فشل
possible. We
المجلس
see
في تمرير مشروع
that this
القرار
failure
يساهم
would
بإطالة
only
أمد
further
الصراع
prolong
أكثر.
this conflict.
ولا أن نحيي الدول التي اعترفت مؤخرا بفلسطين والذين انضموا إلى أكثر من 140 دولة سبق أن اعترفت بها، ونحث المزيد من الدول على الإقدام على هذه الخطوة النبيلة والمبدئية والتي لا شك أنها تدعم جهود تحقيق السلام والتوصل لحل الدولتين. فقيام الدولة الفلسطينية هو مفتاح الحل لكل أزمات المنطقة، وهو الطريق إلى الاستقرار تمهيدا للوصول إلى الأمن والأمان لجميع شعوب المنطقة. السيد الرئيس، 7 أشهر طويلة وأليمة ودموية مرت على أهل غزة وجنوب لبنان، لذا نطالب بوقف فوري ومستدام لإطلاق النار دون تأخير، تجنبا لخروج الأمور عن السيطرة وتوسع رقعة الحرب الإقليمية، وصونا لدماء المدنيين الذين يقتلون يوميا. ونكرر المطالبة بالالتزام بالقرارات الصادرة عن الجمعية العامة وعن مجلس الأمن المطالبة بوقف لإطلاق النار وآخرها القرار 2728 وتركيز الجهود على إنجاح الوساطة التي بادرت بها قطر ومصر والتي قبلتها حماس، ونطالب بالضغط على إسرائيل للقبول أيضا بهذه الوساطة دون تأخير وعدم اجتياح رفح. السيد الرئيس، لبنان يؤكد مرة جديدة التزامه الكامل بالقرار 1701 وهو يبذل كل الجهود السياسية والدبلوماسية لتطبيقه وعودة الاستقرار والهدوء لحدوده الجنوبية تمهيدا لعودة الأهالي إلى قراهم وبيوتهم. كما نرحب بجهود الدول الصديقة وعلى رأسهم الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وفرنسا لما يقومان به من جهود من أجل عدم توسيع الحرب والمساعدة بإيجاد حل سلمي. السيد الرئيس، نطالب مجددا بالعمل بشكل جدي على إعادة إحياء الأفق السياسي لحل الدولتين وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والاعتراف بالدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة على حدود 4 من حزيران لعام 1967 عاصمتها القدس الشرقية وفق مرجعيات الحل، وإيجاد حل عادل لقضية اللاجئين وقضايا الحل النهائي وفق قرارات الشرعية الدولية، ومبادرة السلام العربية في بيروت لعام 2002 وانسحاب إسرائيل من الأراضي العربية المحتلة. وشكرا السيد الرئيس.
I thank the distinguished representative of Lebanon. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since its establishment, the United Nations have served as a platform for dialogue. On many of the issues we address, the UN member states do not agree. We have a diversity of opinions, backgrounds and positions, but this diversity can only be bridged through the dialogue. In our view, the self-determination of peoples is one of the cornerstones for achieving a strong multilateral system. The Slovenian people were able to exercise this right in order to freely establish their own sovereign and independent states. Moreover, for Slovenia, becoming a member of the UN signified a major accomplishment in our diplomatic efforts following our declaration of independence. With these memories still fresh, we understand and empathize with Palestine's aspiration to attain the same goal. Mr. President, only through a two-state solution where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side, will bring the long-lasting peace to the region. In a given situation, we firmly believe in two-layered approach. We must most urgently address the current catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, and we need to resume the political process towards a two-state solution. In the Security Council, Slovenia voted in favor of the recommendation for membership of the State of Palestine in the UN and clearly explained its vote. We trust this could significantly support the peace process, which should address all outstanding issues, support the State of Palestine and guarantee security of Israel. The United Nations has had an important role on the question of Palestine for decades. We are of the view that UN should play a crucial role in the peace processes, and therefore both states should have an equal status in the organization. Each journey is a sequence of steps. Granting membership in the UN to Palestine could be one of these important steps towards peace. Slovenia therefore supports that Security Council continues to deliberate on this question, whereas also underlines that the road to admission of Palestine as a full member of the UN must continue fully in line with the UN Charter. As this process is taking place, Slovenia supports the enhancement of the rights of Palestine in the UN. Amidst the diversity of views at the UN, we always place the UN Charter at the center of our discussions. In that sense, we welcome that the main sponsors of the resolution we adopted on Friday have made necessary and important changes to address concerns of several member states during negotiations. But Slovenia looks forward to the moment when the UN General Assembly will welcome Palestine as a full member of the UN. We appreciate the legal clarity provided on this distinction of rights. Mr. President, dialogue must prevail over weapons in Gaza. Choosing a peaceful way is not always easy, and we welcome the State of Palestine choosing peace through this resolution. Here at the UN, we recognize their daily choice of peace through meetings, resolutions, different means of settlement of disputes under Article 33, and a commitment to engagement. Our vote was therefore a clear signal of support to the continuously choosing the dialogue. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Slovenia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, my delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. I wish to make the following observations, however, in my national capacity. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, it has been said that in the heart of adversity, hope emerges as the strongest force for change. And from the seeds of hope, the tree of peace shall grow, sheltering both nations. We must, therefore, my dear friends, generously nourish that growth. That is my delegation's sincere hope. Sri Lanka supported the call for the admission of the State of Palestine as a member of this assembly in an enhanced status. We have consistently maintained that position, that a just and lasting solution can only be achieved based on a two-state solution on the basis of the borders of the 4th of June 1967. Mr. President, a peaceful and stable Middle East fundamentally depends on whether a two-state solution becomes a reality or not. It is sometimes difficult to find an intelligible rationale to the paradox as to how, while ostensibly supporting a two-state solution, the various state members oppose the admission of the State of Palestine as a regular member of the United Nations. Mr. President, the developments since 7th of October last year have called into question our fundamental humanity as the continued massacre of civilians takes place, with live reports reaching our homes, our workplaces on a daily basis. Mr. President, in your address to the General Assembly on the 8th of April, you very rightly termed the conflict in Gaza as a blight on our common humanity, which is, in the words of the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths, he described it as unparalleled in its intensity, brutality, and scope. Mr. President, there are several reasons that can be urged in this August Assembly to support this resolution, which we have done, that we have endorsed in its present form, which would give Palestine an enhanced status and recognition that would necessarily require the stakeholders to give Palestine their long-eluded standing in the international community. What is it that Palestine can enjoy more than what they enjoy now? My dear friends, it can enjoy enhanced UN membership, which will allow Palestine to actively participate in global efforts to maintain peace and security. It will ensure sovereignty and equality. You will appreciate that enhanced UN membership ensures that a country is recognized as a member state with rights and responsibilities. It provides access to various resources and assistance programs offered by this organization. It strengthens international relations. Think about it. Being a member of the UN enhances its credibility and legitimacy in the international community. It facilitates enhanced diplomatic relations and opens doors for bilateral and multilateral cooperation, trade, and investment. It helps address global challenges. Enhanced membership will enable Palestine to actively participate in addressing global challenges collectively, such as climate change, poverty, terrorism, human rights violations, and public health crises. It will provide a platform to collaborate with other countries and work towards finding collective solutions. And finally, it will place a demand on Palestine itself to uphold international law and human rights. Enhanced membership signifies, therefore, a commitment, I say, to upholding international law, human rights, and fundamental freedoms, and would allow Palestine to engage in discussions, negotiations, and initiatives at promoting and protecting human rights globally. Mr. President, the time, I say, is therefore ripe for this Assembly that has proclaimed with a resounding majority its desire and will that Palestine be granted the status of an enhanced UN membership as envisaged in the resolution that we have now put in place. This Assembly has proclaimed its intentions in the clearest of terms, with an overwhelming decision affirming its will to grant the state of Palestine the right of enhanced membership. Mr. President, we cannot tarry over the right of the Palestinian people to participate in the work of this organization on an equal basis with other member states any longer. Mr. President, to remain in the current state of inertia will surely undermine, I say, and put at stake the moral and ethical foundation of the international system based on the UN Charter and the rule of law. It has been accepted that the state of Palestine has fulfilled the requirements in terms of Article 4. It has accepted the UN Charter as a peace-loving state. It is a member of the non-aligned movement, a member of the G77 in China, a member of the Asia-Pacific group of states, as well as other groupings. The delegation of Palestine, Excellencies, participates in the proceedings of this organization day in and day out in the ordinary course of its work. It is not right, we believe, that a single country or a minority group can stand in the way of an overwhelming majority of the international community. So let us today give the people of Palestine the dignity they deserve, and at the same time give humanity the hope that something is right in this world. It is time to act now. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica.
Señor Presidente. Mr. President,
La cuestión de Palestina se encuentra en
the
la agenda de la
Palestinian
organización
question has
desde
remained on the organization's agenda
1947.
since 1947.
Esta asamblea le concedió el estatus de observador no miembro de las
This
Naciones
General Assembly
Unidas en
granted
el
Palestine
2011,
non-member observer
luego de que
status
su
in the United
solicitud de
Nations in
ingreso como
2011,
miembro pleno
following
fue rechazada por
the
el
Security
Consejo de
Council's
Seguridad.
rejection of its application for full
13
membership.
años más tarde
13
se
years
revive
later,
la solicitud de Palestina.
Palestine's
Costa Rica
application has been
reconoció al Estado de
revitalized.
Palestina en el 2007
In
y votó a favor
2007,
de
Costa
dicha
Rica
resolución.
recognized the state of Palestine and
Nuestro
voted in
país,
favor of
que
such a
reconoció al
resolution.
Estado de
Our
Israel
country, which recognized the state of
inmediatamente después de su
Israel
proclamación
immediately
en
after its proclamation in
1948,
1948,
estableciendo relaciones
established
diplomáticas
diplomatic
en
relations in
1954,
1954,
también votó a
also
favor del
voted in
ingreso de
favor of
Israel como
Israel's
miembro pleno
admission
de esta
as a full
organización
member of this
el 11 de
organization
mayo de
on May 11,
1949.
1949.
Desde 1945,
Since 1945, 142 states have joined the United Nations.
Todos ellos han solicitado unirse a esta organización que
All of them
clama en su carta
sought to apply
constitutiva
because
que
the
en
UN
ella
is
se
an
encuentran
organization that pledges
representados
under
we, the
its charter
peoples,
to represent
nosotros los pueblos.
we, the peoples.
En este momento,
At this moment,
144 estados
144
reconocemos a
countries
Palestina como
recognize
Estado.
Palestine as a state.
La mayoría de dichos países,
The majority of these
incluso
countries,
muchos que
including
aún no lo han
many who have
reconocido,
not yet done so
clamamos por
formally,
una resolución
call for a
pacífica
peaceful
del conflicto
resolution of the
palestino-israelí
Israeli-Palestinian conflict
implementación de la
through the
resolución de los
implementation
dos
of the
estados
two-state
en línea
solution
con la resolución
pursuant
242
to
de
Resolution
1967.
242 of
La
1967.
solución de los dos estados es la
The
opción
two-state
para
solution
responder a las necesidades de
is the
seguridad
option
a
which
largo
meets the
plazo
long-term
de ambos
security needs of
países
both
y a
countries
las legítimas
and the legitimate
aspiraciones de ambos
aspirations of their
pueblos
peoples
de vivir en paz,
to live in peace,
prosperidad y con
prosperity, and
seguridad.
with dignity and
No es
security.
congruente
It is
abogar por la
inconsistent
solución de
to
dos
advocate
estados,
for the two-state
pero negar el
solution, yet
reconocimiento como
deny
estado de pleno
full state
de uno de
recognition
ellos
to one of them.
solo en situaciones de igualdad de
Only in
derechos
situations of
e
equal
igualdad
rights
de
and equal
reconocimiento a
recognition
sus
of
legítimas
their legitimate
aspiraciones
aspirations
podremos avanzar
can we
en
advance
una solución
a
justa
just
y
and
equitativa
equitable
para
solution
ambos países
for both
y
countries
principalmente
and
para
primarily
ambos
for both
pueblos.
peoples.
Ambos deben poder ver
Both must
cumplido
be
su
able to
derecho a
fulfill their right to
autogobernarse y a
self-govern
ser
and to be
reconocidos.
recognized.
Costa Rica votó a favor
Costa
de esta
Rica voted in
resolución
favor
para
of this
sumar su
resolution
voz a este urgente llamado.
To articulate the
Confiamos
urgency of
en,
this call,
en que el
we
Consejo de
trust
Seguridad
that the Security
hará lo
Council
correcto.
will do the right
Es
thing.
hora de acoger en el seno de esta organización al
Within
Estado
this
número
organization,
194.
it is time
El
to
Estado de
welcome
Palestina,
the
en
194th state,
concordancia
the
con
state
nuestros
of
principios
Palestine, in accordance with our
Si
founding
logramos
principles.
contar con ambos
If we
estados
manage to have
con
both
el
states
mismo reconocimiento
with the
internacional
same
en esta
international
organización,
recognition in this
estaremos más
organization,
cerca de una
we will be
verdadera
closer
posibilidad de paz,
to a real
seguridad
possibility
y
of
reconciliación
peace,
para
security, and
Medio Oriente
reconciliation for the
y de
Middle
mayor
East
esperanza
and
para
greater
el mundo
hope
entero.
for the entire
Muchas
world.
gracias.
Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Costa Rica. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway.
President, Norway strongly supports the Palestinian people's rights and aspirations of statehood in accordance with international law. Palestinian statehood is a condition for the realization of the two-state solution in line with the UN Partition Plan of 1947. It is Norway's long-held conviction that a Palestinian state must comprise the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, and be based on the 1967 borders. Norway has been clear that we are ready to support an application for full membership of the United Nations for Palestine when the issue is brought before the General Assembly. We believe that such a membership would increase the possibility to achieve a political settlement beneficial for both Israelis and Palestinians. We underline that the formal procedure of admission to full membership in the United Nations, according to the UN Charter, will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. By co-sponsoring and voting yes to the resolution on membership of the State of Palestine, we have reaffirmed our full support for a just, lasting and comprehensive peace in the Middle East, and underscored the importance of a much-needed settlement to this conflict. We recall the commitments made by the State of Palestine in this regard, including in its application for UN membership. Although our affirmative vote in favor of the resolution does not prejudge our bilateral recognition of Palestine, an issue which we are actively considering, it is testimony to Norway's strong and unequivocal commitment to the two-state solution. This entails a sovereign, democratic, contiguous and viable Palestinian state living side by side with the State of Israel in peace within secure and recognized borders. President, after more than 7 months of war, all eyes are now on Rafah. Norway remains deeply concerned about the recent escalation of hostilities in Rafah, which suggests a larger military operation may be imminent. We call on Israeli authorities to halt the operation. The more than 1 million who have sought refuge in Rafah have already fled multiple times from famine, death, and horror. They are now being told to move again, but no place in Gaza is safe. We stress the urgent need to ensure safe, rapid, unimpeded, and sustained humanitarian access to all the people in need in all of Gaza, and that all available crossings into Gaza remain open so that essential supplies, including aid and fuel, can enter Gaza. We mourn with the Palestinians that have fallen victim to this war and their families that desperate are searching for safety and an end to this war. We mourn with the Israeli victims, hostages, and their families. This war has to stop. There is a desperate need for a ceasefire and the immediate release of all remaining hostages. And we must embark on a path to a political solution. President, only a negotiated solution between the parties can bring lasting peace and security for both Palestinian and Israelis, as well as the wider region. We appeal to both sides to build on Friday's decision in a constructive manner and urgently resume comprehensive and good faith negotiations. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile.
Presidente, agradecemos esta convocatoria al 10º periodo extraordinario de sesiones de emergencia de la Asamblea General para discutir un proyecto de resolución presentado por Emiratos Árabes Unidos en nombre del Grupo Árabe que determina que el Estado de Palestina cumple los requisitos para ser miembro de las Naciones Unidas de acuerdo con el artículo 4 de la Carta y por lo tanto debe ser admitido como miembro de las Naciones Unidas. Chile suscribe la intervención realizada por Uganda en nombre del movimiento de los países no alineados. Asimismo, Chile reafirma su apoyo al Estado de Palestina para que sea admitido como miembro de pleno derecho de las Naciones Unidas. Por esta razón, copatrocinamos el citado proyecto de resolución. Desde el 7 de octubre, la mayoría de los miembros de esta organización y también autoridades de la misma han reiterado que no lograr avances hacia una solución de dos estados solo aumenta la volatilidad y el riesgo para millones de personas en toda la región que siguen viviendo bajo la amenaza constante They continue to live under the constant threat of violence, and therefore the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations must be addressed urgently.
Señor Presidente, deseamos
Mr. President,
expresar
we would
una
like to
vez más
express yet
las
again
condolencias de Chile a las
Chile's
familias y
condolences
seres
to the
queridos
families and
de las
loved
víctimas
ones
que han
of the
muerto en el
victims who
conflicto
have
que
died in
azota
the
a la
conflict
Franja de
choking the
Gaza.
Gaza Strip.
Somos
We are
especialmente
particularly
sensibles por las
sensitive
mujeres y
to
los
the
niños
death of
inocentes que han
innocent
padecido en
women
esta
and
catástrofe.
children.
Subrayamos que la
perished in this
violencia no se
catastrophe.
soluciona
We
con más
underscore the fact that
violencia.
violence is not
Extendemos nuestra
resolved with more
profunda
violence,
solidaridad
and we
con los
extend our
heridos.
deepest solidarity with the
Reiteramos el
wounded.
completo apoyo al dedicado
We
y valiente
reiterate
trabajo
the
que están
complete
realizando las
support
Naciones
for the
Unidas, sus
dedicated and brave
agencias
work
y
of the United
particularmente
Nations,
la
its
UNGA en
agencies, and
terreno.
particularly
Con mucho
UNRWA
pesar
and
sentimos
its
la
work on the
muerte de los
ground. We are
funcionarios de esta
saddened
agencia humanitaria en
as we
esta
mourn the
guerra.
loss of the
En tal
staff of this
sentido,
humanitarian
reprobamos el
agency in
ataque
this
ocurrido
war.
contra la sede de
We
esta
therefore
agencia
condemn the
el
attack
jueves de la
which
semana
took place
pasada
against the
en
headquarters
Jerusalén
of this
Este.
agency on Thursday
Insistimos
last week
que la
in East
protección a la vida
Jerusalem.
humana
We
debe
insist
ser
that
nuestra
protecting
máxima
human
prioridad
life
y la
must be our
protección a
highest
los
priority,
civiles es
and
una
protecting
obligación
civilians
fundamental.
is a key
Por
obligation.
esto se debe
And
respetar
therefore,
la Carta
the
de la
UN
ONU,
Charter,
el derecho internacional y el
international
derecho
law,
internacional
and
humanitario.
international humanitarian law must be
Indudablemente, este
respected.
respeto ha sido
Without a doubt,
infringido por los actos
respect
terroristas
for these
perpetrados por
instruments
Hamas el
was
7 de octubre
violated by the
pasado
terrorist acts
y la respuesta
perpetrated by Hamas
indiscriminada
on the
del
7th of
Estado de
October,
Israel
and the
sobre la
indiscriminate
población que
response by
habita
the
en la
State of
Franja de
Israel
Gaza
against
y
the
que
people
también ha
living in the Gaza
afectado a
Strip, which
Cisjordania.
has also impacted the West
Chile ha
Bank.
condenado sin
Chile
matices las
has
acciones de
unequivocally
Hamas,
condemned
al igual que
actions
todo
by
acto
Hamas,
terrorista,
as well as
hechos de
any other
violencia
terrorist
y
act,
hostilidades
acts of
contra la
violence, or
población civil.
hostility against a civilian
Asimismo,
population.
exigimos la liberación
We also
inmediata
call for the
y sin
immediate and
condiciones de
unconditional
todos los
release
rehenes,
of all
aún en manos
hostages
de
still in the
Hamas,
hands of
velando
Hamas,
por su
who
bienestar
must
y
guarantee
trato
their
en
well-being
conformidad
and
al
proper
derecho
treatment
internacional.
in accordance with
Nos
international
inquieta el
law.
asedio impuesto por
We are
Israel
concerned
a la Franja de Gaza,
at
porque ha
the siege
significado dejar a
imposed
su
by Israel
población
on Gaza
sin sus necesidades
because
básicas
it has meant
cubiertas,
that the people there
incluido
are left
alimentos,
without basic
agua,
needs,
medicinas y
including
combustible,
food, water,
provocando
medicine,
hambre
fuel.
generalizada y
This has led
enfermedades.
to widespread hunger
Condenamos la
and
ofensiva
disease.
militar de
We
Israel
condemn
contra la
Israel's
ciudad de
military
Rafah.
offensive against the
Las
city of
consecuencias de
Rafah.
esta
The
operación
consequences
militar
of this
pueden ser
military
nefastas en
operation
varios aspectos
can
y
be
solo
devastating
dilatan
in many
conseguir la
ways
paz.
and will only
Nos
delay
sumamos
the
a la
achievement of
preocupación
peace.
por los
We
antecedentes
join
sobre el
in concerns
descubrimiento de
expressed by
fosas
previous
comunes
speakers
en los hospitales de
about the
Nasser
discovery
y
of mass
Al-Shifa
graves in the
y sus
hospitals of
alrededores
Nasser
en
and
Gaza,
Al-Shifa and
donde fueron
in
enterrados
the
varios
neighboring
cientos de
areas in
cuerpos,
Gaza,
entre
where
ellos
several
mujeres,
hundred
niños
bodies
y
were
personas
found
mayores.
buried, including
Sobre
bodies of
esto,
women, children, and
agradecemos a
older
los 15
persons.
miembros del
We are
Consejo de
grateful to the
Seguridad
15 members
que
of the
tuvieron la
Security Council
capacidad de
who were
llegar
able
al
to
consenso
arrive
el
at a
viernes 10 con
consensus
una declaración
on
de
Friday the
prensa.
10th through
Chile
a press
insiste por un
statement.
alto al fuego inmediato
Chile
y
insists
permanente,
on an
un
immediate
mayor
and
flujo de
permanent
asistencia
ceasefire with a
humanitaria
greater
hacia
influx of
Gaza,
humanitarian
garantías para el
assistance to
acceso
Gaza,
pleno, inmediato,
guaranteeing the
seguro,
full,
sin
immediate,
trabas y
safe,
sostenido de la ayuda
unfettered, and
humanitaria,
sustained
es
access for
decir, que se
humanitarian
eliminen
aid.
todos los
In other
obstáculos a
words,
dicha
all
asistencia
obstacles
y
to that
facilitar el uso
assistance
de
must
todas
be
las rutas
eliminated,
terrestres
and the use of
disponibles
all
para
available
ingresar a
land
la
routes
Franja de Gaza.
for entry into Gaza
Observamos que
must
las
be
repercusiones
facilitated.
y las
We have seen
ramificaciones
that
de
the
este conflicto
repercussions
en el
and
resto de la
ramifications
región
of this
son de
conflict
profunda
in the remainder of the
preocupación por la
region are of
prolongación
great
de la
concern
violencia.
as the
Todos
violence
estos
continues.
actos han sido condenados
All
por la
of these
mayoría
acts have
de la
been
comunidad
condemned by the
internacional.
majority of the
Por
international
esto hacemos
community.
eco del llamado del
We
propio
therefore
secretario
echo
general
the
y los
appeal by the
respectivos
Secretary
jefes de
General
distintas agencias de la
and
ONU
the
para
appeals by
disminuir las
the heads
tensiones.
of various UN
Animamos los
agencies
esfuerzos
to
de la
reduce
coordinadora
tensions. We
humanitaria y
encourage
de la
the efforts of
reconstrucción
the
en Gaza,
humanitarian
señora
reconstruction
Sigrid
coordinator
Kaag,
in
en
Gaza,
sus labores y
Ms.
esperamos
Sigrid
que
Kaag,
reciba todas las facilidades
and
para
in her
llevar a
work,
cabo
and
su
we hope
cometido.
that she will be granted every
Alentamos
facility
a
and
todas las
support as she
partes
carries out her
involucradas, así
tasks.
como a la
We
comunidad
encourage all
internacional,
parties
a
involved
seguir trabajando
and
para
as
terminar
well as
esta
the
guerra.
international community
Esto
to
solo es
continue to work
posible
to end
a
this
través de la
war.
vía
This is
diplomática
only
y el
possible
diálogo.
through diplomatic
Reconocemos los
means and dialogue.
esfuerzos y
We
resultados
recognize
que
the
países
efforts and
amigos
the
han
results
logrado
which
para
friendly countries
reducir
have
las
achieved
tensiones.
to reduce tensions.
Destacamos las tres
We
resoluciones
underscore the
aprobadas
three
en el Consejo de
resolutions
Seguridad
adopted by the
en pos de
Security
conseguir el
Council
cese
in an effort to
a
achieve a
minorarlo o
ceasefire
brindar facilidades a la ayuda humanitaria.
and to
La
provide
2712 y la
humanitarian aid. I'm
2720,
referring to
adoptadas el
resolutions
año pasado, y
2712 and
especialmente la
2720 adopted
2728 del
last year,
25 de
and in
marzo.
particular,
Recordamos que
resolution
todas las resoluciones de
2728
este órgano
adopted
son
on March
vinculantes y
25th.
deben ser
We recall that all
acatadas y
these
respetadas.
resolutions of the Council are
Señor
binding
Presidente,
and
Chile
must be
promueve la
complied with
solución de
and
los dos
respected.
estados
Mr.
y el
President,
derecho de
Chile
Israel y
promotes the
Palestina a
two-state
vivir en
solution and the right
armonía
of Israel and
dentro de fronteras
Palestine to live in
internacionales
harmony
seguras
within
y reconocidas
internationally
y con total
recognized and
respeto a los
safe
derechos
borders
humanos
with full
de
respect
todos sus
for the human
habitantes.
rights of all the
Hacemos un llamado
inhabitants.
urgente para
We
dar
make an
cabal y
urgent
pronto
appeal
cumplimiento
for
a las resoluciones
full,
pertinentes
immediate
que
compliance with
respaldan
the
el
relevant
derecho del pueblo
resolutions
palestino
supporting the
a
right of the
constituir un Estado
Palestinian
soberano,
people to
como
build
son
a
las
sovereign
resoluciones
state
181 y
that is reflected
242
in
de esta
GA
Asamblea
resolutions
General, y
181
también
and
aquellas relacionadas
242
como la
and
resolución
related resolutions
2334
such as
del Consejo de
Security
Seguridad,
Council Resolution
donde se reafirma que el
2334,
establecimiento de
which
asentamientos
reaffirms
por
that the
parte de
establishment
Israel
of
en el
settlements by
territorio palestino
Israel
ocupado,
in the occupied
incluida
Palestinian
Jerusalén
territory,
Oriental,
including
no
East
tiene validez
Jerusalem,
legal
are
y
illegal
constituye una
and
violación
constitute a
del derecho
violation of
internacional.
international law.
Chile siempre ha reafirmado como prioridad de
A
su política
priority of
exterior
Chile's foreign
el
policy
contribuir
has
a
always
alcanzar una
been to
solución
reaffirm
pacífica
a
en el
peaceful
Medio
solution
Oriente,
in the
expresando
Middle East.
constantemente
We have
nuestro apoyo
constantly
a
expressed
una
our
solución
support
justa y
for a
duradera
just and
conforme
lasting
a las
solution
resoluciones de
in
las Naciones
accordance
Unidas.
with UN resolutions.
Subrayamos que las
We
medidas
underscore the
cautelares
fact
adoptadas por la
that
Corte
provisional
Internacional de
measures
Justicia
adopted by the
deben ser
ICJ
cumplidas por
must be
todas sus
complied with by
partes.
all parties.
Recordamos que
We
Chile,
recall
junto
that
con
Chile,
México,
along with
remitió a la
Mexico,
Corte Penal
submitted to
Internacional
the
un
ICC
escrito
a
sobre la
letter on the
situación
situation
en
in
Palestina para
Palestine
reforzar la
to
investigación de los
support
presuntos
the
crímenes de guerra
investigation of
y
alleged
crímenes de
war
lesa
crimes and
humanidad
crimes against
cometidos en
humanity
Gaza,
committed in
Cisjordania,
Gaza, the West
Jerusalén
Bank,
Este
East
e Israel.
Jerusalem, and Israel.
Para Chile, el
For Chile,
esclarecimiento de los
clarifying
hechos y
the facts
responsabilidades,
and the
así como la
perpetrators,
rendición
as
de
well as
cuentas,
ensuring
son
accountability,
esenciales
are
para poner
essential
fin
in
a la
order to put an
impunidad
end to
y prevenir
impunity
la
and to
futura
prevent
comisión
the
de
future
crímenes
commission of
internacionales.
international
Muchas gracias.
crimes. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Chile. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Señor presidente, este debate tiene lugar en el contexto de una situación extremadamente grave en Gaza y donde una ofensiva militar en Rafah agravaría la devastadora crisis humanitaria y provocará una mayor inestabilidad, si cabe, regional, que debemos evitar. Por ello, España sigue exigiendo un acuerdo para un alto al fuego inmediato que permita la entrada masiva y sin trabas de ayuda humanitaria en Gaza y la liberación inmediata de todos los rehenes israelíes. Tan pronto como se produzca un alto al fuego, debemos trabajar para consolidarlo y comenzar la gestión post-crisis. Será imprescindible apoyar a la autoridad palestina, que debe asumir el gobierno en Gaza y Cisjordania. Condenamos el ataque contra las instalaciones de UNGA en Jerusalén que tuvo lugar la semana pasada y recordamos la obligación que establece el derecho internacional humanitario de proteger a los trabajadores humanitarios. Señor presidente, las aspiraciones nacionales de israelíes y palestinos y su deseo de vivir en paz y seguridad son pretensiones legítimas que deben tener respuesta. La ausencia de una solución satisfactoria está en el origen de este largo ciclo de violencia. España acoge con satisfacción la adopción de la resolución el pasado viernes que mi país apoyó y copatrocinó. La resolución permite reforzar las modalidades de participación de Palestina en esta asamblea y marca el comienzo del proceso de materialización de la solución de los dos estados, de la que el reconocimiento de Palestina a título nacional es un elemento fundamental. Por eso España ha tomado la decisión de reconocer a Palestina como Estado próximamente, sumándose a los más de 140 países que representan un creciente consenso de la comunidad internacional. Con estas decisiones dotaremos de mayor legitimidad al gobierno palestino, expulsando el extremismo del espacio público. Un Estado palestino es la mejor garantía de seguridad para Israel y para la región. Además, buscamos equilibrar el debate entre las partes en las negociaciones que tendrán lugar para finalizar el proceso de paz que echó a andar en la conferencia de Madrid hace más de 30 años. Por último, con el reconocimiento buscamos reforzar la coherencia y el respeto a la legalidad internacional. No tenemos dobles raseros. Señor Presidente, con objeto de avanzar en la materialización de los dos estados, España ha propuesto una conferencia de paz con las partes y con la comunidad internacional. Esta propuesta ya ha sido respaldada por la Unión Europea, la Liga de Estados Árabes y la Organización de Cooperación Islámica, más de 80 de los estados que conformamos esta Asamblea General. Por eso reiteramos el llamamiento para que esta Organización de las Naciones Unidas haga suya esta propuesta y dirija el proceso. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Spain. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of El Salvador.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Han pasado 26 años
26
desde que se convocó por primera vez este 10º periodo extraordinario de sesiones de emergencia en abril de 1997. Hoy, esta Asamblea delibera nuevamente sobre la cuestión en el Medio Oriente, en un contexto en el que millones de personas han huido de sus hogares en busca de refugio. Decenas de miles, en su mayoría mujeres, niños, han perdido sus vidas, y la crisis humanitaria, lejos de mejorar, se agudiza cada día más. Mi país suma su voz de preocupación por las penurias que vive la población de Gaza, sin la posibilidad de cubrir sus necesidades más básicas, como alimentos, agua, suministros médicos, afectando de manera directa la vida de miles de personas inocentes. Abordar con seriedad y determinación la plena membresía del Estado de Palestina en Naciones Unidas se plantea en las condiciones actuales como un imperativo. El Salvador reconoce y tiene relaciones con Palestina desde hace más de una década y está consternado por el exacerbado sufrimiento en su pueblo. Mi país, por ello, no ha dudado en brindar un firme apoyo a la resolución adoptada en esta sesión especial de emergencia. Admitir al Estado de Palestina como miembro pleno de Naciones Unidas es un paso crucial hacia el logro de una solución justa y duradera al conflicto y la estabilidad también en Medio Oriente. Es una reafirmación del compromiso de los Estados que conforman estas Naciones Unidas de defender sus propios principios y propósitos, asegurando el pleno respeto de los derechos y la dignidad del pueblo palestino, incluyendo su derecho a la autodeterminación y también vivir en paz. Señor presidente, tal como lo hemos expresado recientemente, lamentamos que el Consejo de Seguridad se haya ocupado de esta cuestión desde hace más de 7 décadas y que actuando en nombre de toda la membresía de Naciones Unidas y habiendo celebrado centenares de sesiones oficiales, no ha sido capaz de proveer una solución amplia, justa y duradera a la cuestión de Palestina. Hacemos por ello un llamado a que el Consejo de Seguridad reconozca la necesidad de que el pueblo palestino ejerza su derecho a la libre determinación y haga de la solución biestatal una realidad. La posición de El Salvador ha sido coherente y consistente a través de los años. Abogaremos siempre por una solución pacífica y definitiva al conflicto en Medio Oriente, cimentada en la existencia de dos estados y reconociendo la voluntad expresa de las resoluciones vinculantes del Consejo de Seguridad y también las resoluciones de la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas. Permítame reafirmar que admitir al Estado de Palestina como miembro pleno de esta organización es hoy más importante que nunca. El Salvador reitera su apoyo al derecho del pueblo palestino a su libre determinación. Exhortamos al Consejo de Seguridad a reconsiderar de manera favorable este asunto de máximo interés global y reafirme su compromiso con los derechos de paz, justicia, igualdad y derechos humanos para todos los pueblos. and for the rights of all
Si bien esta
peoples.
resolución no
While this
otorga a
resolution
Palestina el
does not
estatus de
give
Estado miembro
Palestine
pleno en esta
the
organización, consideramos
status of
que
full-fledged
esta
membership in this
fortalecerá
organization, we believe
la
that it will
práctica consuetudinaria
help
y allanará su
support
participación
our
en
customary
diferentes
practice
espacios
and its
multilaterales.
involvement in a number of
Este contexto
international
permitirá al
fora. This
Estado de
context
Palestina
will enable the
ejercer
Palestinian
progresivamente
state
su legítimo
progressively
derecho
to
de
exercise its
intervenir de manera
legitimate
más
right
efectiva
to
e
have a more
igualitaria en Naciones Unidas.
fair and equal impact on the work of the
El
United
Salvador
Nations. El
se
Salvador
une en solidaridad con el
joins in
pueblo
solidarity with the
palestino y reitera
Palestinian
su
people, and we
compromiso con la
reiterate
paz,
our
la
commitment
seguridad
to peace
y la
and
justicia en la
security
región,
and justice
con
in the
pleno
region,
respeto
with
al
full
derecho
respect
internacional
for
y también
international law
la Carta de
and
Naciones
also for the
Unidas.
UN Charter.
Permítame finalizar
Let me conclude
con la reafirmación de
by
mi país
reaffirming
a su compromiso de
my
trabajar
country's
en
commitment
colaboración
to
con
work
todos los Estados
together
miembros
with all member
para
states
alcanzar una solución
to ensure
pacífica
a
y
peaceful
duradera a este
and lasting
conflicto.
solution to this
Confiamos
conflict.
en que
We
esta
trust
Asamblea
that
General,
this
a
General
través de la
Assembly,
sesión especial de
through the
emergencia,
ESS,
continuará actuando con
will continue
determinación
to act
para poner
decisively
fin al
to put
sufrimiento
an
del
end
pueblo
to the
palestino.
suffering of the
Muchísimas gracias,
Palestinian
señor
people.
presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of El Salvador. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brunei Darussalam.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. At the outset, Brunei Darussalam aligns itself with the joint statement delivered by Mauritania on behalf of the OIC, as well as the joint statement delivered by Uganda on behalf of the NAM. Mr. President, thank you for convening this 10 Emergency Special Session ESS in light of the recent failure of the UN Security Council in considering the UN membership for the State of Palestine. Brunei Darussalam has consistently advocated for the rights of the Palestinian people and have stood in solidarity with them, recognizing their inalienable rights to self-determination and statehood. We stand firm in our support for the State of Palestine to be accorded permanent membership to the United Nations. We deeply regret that the use of the veto has hampered the realization of a very important resolution, one that would allow for the State of Palestine to be granted a full membership in the UN, as we believe that it would represent a significant stride towards attaining enduring peace in the Middle East. Mr. President, Brunei Darussalam fully supports the resolution that has been tabled at this resumed ESS, and we welcome the adoption of this historic resolution. We must exhaust all efforts to ensure the admission of the State of Palestine as a full-fledged member of the United Nations. Mr. President, Brunei Darussalam unequivocally condemns the occupying powers' military operation in Rafah and subsequent takeover of the Rafah crossing, a vital passage for the delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. This unacceptable move by the occupying power represents a dangerous escalation that has killed more innocent civilians, including women and children, and ignores the international calls to protect the safety and lives of millions of Palestinians seeking refuge in the area. The situation in Palestine is already a humanitarian crisis of profound proportion perpetuated by the occupying powers' continued disregard of international law with impunity. There must be a halt to all the violence, injustice, and oppression by the occupying power against the Palestinians. Mr. President, it is also important to ensure that the root causes of the conflict are resolved to prevent further destabilization and escalation of violence in the region, with the aim to bring about a permanent solution to the conflict. Towards this end, we urge the international community to remain resolute in their commitment to the two-state solution towards achieving an independent state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brunei Darussalam. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
شكرا سعادة الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President,
في مستهل
بياني
نيابة عن وفد سلطنة عمان أن أتقدم إليكم ببالغ الشكر على عقد هذه الجلسة والتي تأتي في أعقاب فشل مجلس الأمن
and this following the failure of the Security Council to grant a full accession of Palestine to the United Nations. In this regard, my country applauds the vote by the General Assembly with an overwhelming majority vote on resolution in favor of the state of Palestine's membership to the United Nations. The global majority has exhorted the Security Council to recognize the state of Palestine. This is a practical way to allow us to implement the two-state solution and to achieve peace in line with resolutions under international law. We fully align ourselves with the statements delivered by the UAE on behalf of the Arab state, as well as the statement delivered by Mauritania on behalf of the OIC and Uganda on behalf of non-aligned movement.
لمطلب دولة فلسطين المشروع
We urge the international community to support the legitimate request of the state of Palestine to membership at full membership at the United Nations, like all other countries in the world. Mr. President,
تعرب سلطنة عمان عن بالغ القلق
لاستمرار
التصعيد العسكري الذي تمارسه قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وجرائم الحرب والإبادة ضد المدنيين العزل في قطاع غزة والأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة وتحذر من مغبة العمليات العسكرية التي تقوم بها قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلية في مدينة رفح والتي تنذر بآثار كارثية خطيرة قد تؤدي إلى توسيع نطاق
consequences that are liable to expand the conflict and further foment tensions in the region. My country, the Sultanate of Oman, urges the international community to immediately intervene to end this war and to end the barbaric acts being perpetrated by Israel has a duty needs to be held accountable after the war crimes, after the starvation, the famine, insofar as these constitute crimes against humanity. Mr. President, my country believes that the end to the conflict in the Middle East hinges on the establishment of a Palestinian state and granting Palestine a status of full membership at the United Nations. This is a strategic priority which is of paramount importance. It is a global demand on the part of the international community. We call upon the Security Council to reconsider the question of the admission of Palestine as a member of the United Nations. The rejection of this kind of a request threatens international peace and security and undermines the credibility of the Security Council, which has embraced a double standards approach when it comes to the question of Palestine. To conclude, we reiterate our support for peace efforts and the two-state solution with the peaceful coexistence of the two states. We reject all plans that are at variance with peace and the two-state solution, and we will support the legitimate request of the Palestinian people and the request to gain full membership in the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Oman. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أود في البداية
أن أشكر السيد رئيس الجمعية العامة على الاستجابة لطلب المجموعات العربية والإسلامية وعدم الانحياز لاستئناف أعمال الدورة الاستثنائية الطارئة العاشرة. لقد رحبت المملكة المغربية باعتماد الجمعية العامة يوم الجمعة الماضي القرار الذي يدعم طلب دولة فلسطين بالحصول على العضوية الكاملة بمنظمة الأمم المتحدة، ويوصي مجلس الأمن بإعادة النظر إيجابا في طلب قبولها، كما يمنحها مزيدا من الحقوق في إطار المنظمة الأممية. ولقد كانت المملكة المغربية من أوائل الدول التي رعت هذا القرار ودعمته، ويعتبر هذا القرار خطوة مهمة حيث أصبحت مسألة انضمام دولة فلسطين للأمم المتحدة ومنحها العضوية الكاملة مسألة ضرورية لكونها تندرج في إطار حل الدولتين المتوافق عليه دوليا، كما تجدد المملكة المغربية التي أسوعها جلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله لجنة القدس المنبثقة عن منظمة التعاون الإسلامي التأكيد على موقفها الثابت والتاريخي والراسخ من عدالة القضية الفلسطينية وحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني المشروعة وفي مقدمتها حقه في إقامة دولته الفلسطينية المستقلة على حدود الرابع من يونيو 1967 وعاصمة
East Jerusalem as its capital.
إن الكارثة الإنسانية التي يشهدها قطاع غزة منذ 7 أشهر تفوق الوصف،
genuine humanitarian catastrophe that has been unfolding for the past 7 months in Gaza, and this has repercussions for both the region and the entire world. We have condemned the Israeli military actions undertaken in the Strip, these actions which run counter to international humanitarian law. There are thousands of victims, civilian casualties, health infrastructure is being destroyed, and educational infrastructure is also being destroyed, which undermines the ability to uphold IHL. We emphasize the need for a ceasefire and the need for access to humanitarian assistance in sufficient quantities in a safe, secure, and unimpeded way in the Gaza Strip. And my country has participated in these efforts since the outbreak of this crisis, and we have done so following the orders of His Majesty the King. Furthermore, we wish to reiterate the importance of protection of civilians and the importance of the protection of humanitarian personnel in line with IHL. Furthermore, there's a need to release the hostages and detainees and prisoners. Mr. President, my country believes that it is not possible to accept the threat of expansion of the conflict, including into Rafah. This would have devastating humanitarian consequences. Moreover, we categorically reject
وتدعو إلى وقف الإجراءات الإسرائيلية الأحادية التي تطال الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة بما فيها القدس الشريف والمسجد الأقصى المبارك فمدينة القدس يجب أن تبقى أرضا للقاء ورمزا للتعايش السلمي بالنسبة لأتباع الديانة التوحيدية الثلاث ومركزا لقيم الاحترام المتبادل والحوار. أود التذكير بما في الخطاب الثاني لجلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله إلى المشاركين في القمة الخامسة عشر لمنظمة التعاون الإسلامي التي انعقدت في العاصمة الغامبية بنجول بتاريخ 4 مايو 2024 وأقتبس. تدعو الدول المؤثرة في مسار تسوية هذا النزاع إلى تحمل مسؤوليتها التاريخية وإعمال العقل والمنطق والعمل الجاد من أجل وضع حد لهذا الوضع الكارثي وإخراج المنطقة من دوامة العنف وسياسة الإقصاء وفرض الأمر الواقع والعمل على تهيئة الظروف الملائمة لإعادة إطلاق عملية سلمية حقيقية تفضي إلى حل الدولتين المتوافق عليه دوليا نهاية الاقتباس. وشكرا.
A two-state solution, and of quote, thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mauritius.
Mr. President, Mauritius welcomes the adoption of the General Assembly resolution declaring that Palestine is qualified for full membership and therefore should be admitted in the United Nations. The resounding support garnered from the General Assembly on this historic resolution is a meaningful achievement. We have witnessed the triumph of solidarity and justice towards Palestine and the Palestinian people as the international community affirms its rightful place among the family of nations. The result achieved is more than timely and is the logical consequence of the adoption of the 2012 UN resolution granting the status of non-member observer to Palestine, which Mauritius supported. Mr. President, Mauritius has consistently stood in solidarity with the Palestinian people, affirming their legitimate right to self-determination and their aspirations for the establishment of a sovereign, viable, and secure Palestine state through peaceful means. We are convinced that the admission of Palestine as a full-fledged member of our organization would be a major step ahead towards the recognition and implementation of the two-state solution in accordance with all relevant United Nations resolutions and international law. Mauritius has consistently supported the application made by Palestine for membership in the UN, including its admission as a member of the UNESCO in 2011. Since 2012, we have actively advocated for Palestine's full membership in the United Nations through various resolutions. We hold the view that the United Nations and the international community bear a solemn responsibility to uphold the dignity of the Palestinian people and safeguard their fundamental rights, including the right to statehood and security. Furthermore, Mauritius believes that Palestine fulfills all necessary criteria to be acknowledged as a sovereign state. Its accession, therefore, would be in accordance with Article 4 of the United Nations Charter. Mauritius joins the call for the Security Council to reconsider Palestine's application for membership. The dire humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza underscores the urgent need for action on part of our organization. We firmly believe that granting full membership status to Palestine will pave the way for peace, facilitated under the auspices of the United Nations and the international community. Mr. President, Palestine has for far too long been denied the right to be fully part of this organization. We believe that this resolution will pave the way for a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mauritius. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Dominica on behalf of the Caribbean community.
Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, I have the honor to take the floor on behalf of the 14 member states of the Caribbean community. On this historic occasion, CARICOM affirmed our collective support for this important General Assembly resolution. We did so because CARICOM recognizes the right of the Palestinian people to their own state, and because we believe this state is entitled to take its rightful place here in the United Nations. This position is in keeping with relevant resolutions adopted by this General Assembly. We take this opportunity to reiterate our great distress at the ongoing violence and deteriorating situation in Gaza, which has resulted in the tragic loss of civilian lives, including the deaths of women and children on an unprecedented scale, and widespread displacement and suffering. We are particularly concerned at the escalating situation in Rafah and urge maximum restraint to avoid a catastrophe of unprecedented proportion. CARICOM reiterates its strong condemnation of the attacks by Hamas and the taking of hostages on 7 October 2023. as well as of the Israeli actions that violate international humanitarian law and the human rights of the Palestinian people. In this regard, CARICOM urges an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and safe and unimpeded access for the delivery of adequate and sustained humanitarian assistance. We strongly advocate full compliance with the rule of law and therefore call for the unconditional release of all hostages. We further call for the release of all those illegally detained. CARICOM reaffirms its unwavering commitment to a holistic roadmap towards a two-state solution. In keeping with the United Nations Security Council, Resolution 242, as the only viable path to peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The community therefore calls for a renewed commitment to a peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through meaningful dialogue and negotiation, and calls upon the international community to play a constructive role in facilitating a lasting solution to the conflict and achieving a durable peace that guarantees the human rights, dignity, and security of both sides. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegation representative of Dominica, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Maldives.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank you for resuming the 10th Emergency Special Session of the General Assembly. The United Nations was founded on the principles of supporting the rights of all peoples to determine their own political, economic, and social destinies. The General Assembly remains the only dedicated space where we, the people of the United Nations, can convene to advocate for justice, for human rights and dignity, for peace and freedom. We all agree that the peace is long overdue. We have made calls for a ceasefire for de-escalation. We have desperately pleaded for the protection of Palestinian civilians and their legal and humanitarian rights. The difficult point of contention within this hall has been on the question of how to bring a just and lasting peace. The goal must be to take action for peace. The Maldives commends the United Arab Emirates for taking the initiative to put forward the resolution determining that Palestine is ready to be admitted as a member of the United Nations. As a proud co-sponsor of this resolution, we are moved by overwhelming support extended by member states to the Palestinian cause by voting yes on the resolution. Our collective call sends a strong message to the Security Council to reconsidering the application of the Palestinian for full UN membership favorably. The Maldives commends the tireless efforts on the ground in Gaza, at the United Nations, and across the world to stop the suffering borne by the Palestinian people. The Maldives recognizes the relentless determinations of organizations like UNRWA in Palestine. They are the heroes who have allowed us to hold on to hope against all the odds. In the face of the immense humanitarian tragedy taking place in Palestine, the Maldives reiterates its call to all member states to act with urgency. Madam President, Israel's impunity must end. Israel's rejection of the ceasefire last Monday demonstrates that its intention has always been to land grab, enforce apartheid policies, and commit genocide. The systematic, deliberate, and brutal attacks against the Palestinian people did not begin on 7th October. Israel has inflicted collective punishment, mass destruction, forced displacement, and unimaginable trauma on the Palestinian people over 7 decades. Israel's ongoing operation in Rafah is the latest and most terrible of its aggression. There are more than 1 million Palestinians in Rafah who have been driven into the city for shelter. Many of them are children. Many of them are sick, injured, malnourished, traumatized, and living with disabilities because of Israel's action. Israeli supporters must do more than make hollow statements to hold it accountable. The Maldives calls on Israeli supporters to stop supplying Israel with weapons and to make Israel comply with their obligations under international law and international humanitarian law. We can only bring comprehensive solution to the conflict in the Middle East with a recognition of Palestine. The Maldives remains resolute in supporting the Palestinian people in their inalienable right to self-determination. The Maldives further reiterates its call for establishment of a sovereign and independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital in line with the pre-1967 borders. Maldives once again implores the Security Council to favorably reconsider the admission of the State of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, as urged by the General Assembly resolution adopted on Friday. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Maldives, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Madam President, I wish to thank the President of the General Assembly for resuming this emergency special session. Vietnam aligns itself with the statement made by the distinguished representative of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Madam President, more than 7 months into the Gaza conflict, peace prospects remain elusive. Fears of escalation into regional war are growing amidst direct confrontation between the region's major military powers. There's no sign of diminished violence or an end to civilian deaths. Vietnam is deeply concerned about these increased hostilities and tension. The impending ground offensive on Rafah in particular would take an unimaginable toll on civilians, especially on women and children, and further aggravate the ongoing humanitarian crisis. Vietnam strongly condemns all forms of indiscriminate violence, targeting civilians and critical civilian infrastructure. We firmly oppose all acts in violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of any state. In this regard, Vietnam urges all parties to exercise utmost restraint, engage in dialogues, and strictly abide by international law, the UN Charter, and relevant UN resolutions. We renew our call for an immediate cessation of hostilities and violence and unconditional release of all hostages. We urge that all measures are taken to ensure unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance and reaffirm Vietnam's continued support for UNRWA's central role in this regard. Vietnam supports all ongoing diplomatic efforts towards an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza to put a stop to civilian casualties and sufferings. In the long run, a lasting, just, and peaceful resolution to the Gaza conflict and the Middle East peace process can only be achieved through the two-state solution in conformity with international law and relevant UN resolutions. We are disappointed that last month the Security Council once again failed to reach agreement on the overdue admission of Palestine as a UN member state. This goes against the will of not only the Palestinian people, but also the majority of the international community. Artificial and political motivated obstacles continue to hinder Palestine's legitimate quest for further membership. Mr. President, Vietnam stands with the Palestinian people in the plight to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination and supports Palestine's early admission to the United Nations. Our long-standing solidarity and unwavering support for the Palestinian people are deeply rooted in our common and long struggle for sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness of our peoples. Vietnam's own path to the UN membership was a long and an arduous one. It fell victim to the Security Council veto on numerous occasions. The many barriers and obstacles, however, did not stop the irreversible course of history and prevent the peace-loving nation of Vietnam's eventual admission to the United Nations in 1977. We witnessed history last Friday as the State of Palestine inched closer to full membership with the adoption of the GA resolution that allows Palestine greater engagement in the work of the UN. Vietnam co-sponsored and voted in favor of this monumental resolution together with a large majority of this august body. The legitimate aspirations of millions of Palestinian people, Palestinian for peace, development, and equality must not be denied. Palestine's admission to the UN as a full member would be the most conducive to the two-state solution, as it lays the ground for meaningful negotiations between the parties on an equal footing. And that would be an important step towards achieving sustainable peace and stability in the Middle East and beyond. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Vietnam, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of plurinational state of Bolivia.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
Lugar, agradezco a
I'd like to begin by thanking you for convening this meeting to address one of the most important priority issues at the United Nations so that finally we will see the light at the end of the tunnel for the Palestinian people. At the same time, I thank the UAE for introducing the draft resolution on admitting new members to the United Nations on behalf of the Arab Group, and we endorse the statements made on Friday by the Republic of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on behalf of the group of friends in defense of the UN Charter.
Señora Presidenta,
Madam President,
las palabras y los discursos resultan siendo insuficientes frente a la violencia, el derramamiento de sangre y los ataques atroces contra el pueblo palestino, que han alcanzado niveles absolutamente inhumanos, causando el sufrimiento inimaginable de niños, mujeres, ancianos, personas inocentes, que lo único que desean es vivir en paz y libertad. Israel, la potencia ocupante, desde el pasado 7 de octubre, no ha cesado un segundo sus intensos bombardeos y ataques contra los territorios palestinos. Como se ha informado a la fecha, más de 34,000 personas han sido asesinadas y 1.7 millones de personas, que representan cerca del 75% de la población, han sido desplazadas en toda la franja de Gaza, porque ya no existe ningún lugar seguro para ellas y ellos. El próximo 15 de mayo los palestinos rememorarán el día del Nakba, lo cual nos recuerda los hechos de hace 76 años, cuando el mundo observó con los brazos cruzados que cientos de miles de palestinos fueran obligados a huir o verse expulsados de sus hogares, y pareciera que hoy
Estamos frente a una inminente ofensiva militar de Israel en Rafah, a pesar de los llamados de la comunidad internacional para que se evite una nueva acción genocida en Gaza. Adicionalmente, se ha bloqueado completamente el flujo de la ayuda humanitaria. Presidente, aprovecho esta oportunidad para compartir con ustedes que la semana pasada mi país entregó más de 90 toneladas de ayuda humanitaria en el puerto egipcio de Alejandría a la Media Luna Roja para que sea distribuido en la Franja de Gaza. Estas cargas contienen mayoritariamente medicinas, alimentos básicos, entre otros insumos, y hacemos un llamado para que no se obstaculice su distribución. Presidenta y distinguidos colegas, la Organización de las Naciones Unidas tiene una deuda histórica con el pueblo palestino, que hace más de 7 décadas le prometió constituir los dos estados, y lamentablemente al día de hoy se implementaron todas las decisiones relativas a Israel y por diversas circunstancias, no así los referidos a Palestina. Es un tiempo que la ONU, la comunidad internacional, haga cumplir todas las resoluciones pertinentes sobre el tema sin mayores dilaciones y obstáculos de Israel y su protector. Es por ello que mi país aplaude el compromiso y la decisión de todos los estados que votaron a favor de la resolución sobre la admisión de nuevos miembros de las Naciones Unidas, como lo hizo Bolivia copatrocinando y votando a favor, lo cual representa nuestro firme compromiso y apoyo a la admisión de Palestina como Estado miembro pleno de las Naciones Unidas. La inclusión de Palestina no solo es un acto de justicia y reconocimiento, sino también un pequeño paso hacia la paz y la estabilidad de la región. Palestina ha demostrado su compromiso con los principios y valores fundamentales de las Naciones Unidas y cumple con las prerrogativas de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, en particular con el requisito número 4 para su admisión como Estado miembro pleno de la ONU. Adicionalmente, al día de hoy, 143 Estados miembros de las Naciones Unidas reconocen a Palestina como un Estado soberano e independiente que ejerce sus derechos y asume sus obligaciones. Por otra parte, la admisión de Palestina como miembro de las Naciones Unidas es un paso fundamental hacia la construcción de un orden mundial más justo y equitativo, donde todas las naciones sean tratadas con igual respeto y dignidad. La aprobación mayoritaria a la resolución es la muestra del consenso mayoritario, por lo cual el Consejo de Seguridad debe reconsiderar de inmediato favorablemente esta cuestión, tomando en cuenta además la opinión consultiva de la Corte Internacional de Justicia del 28 de mayo de 1948 y en estricta conformidad con el artículo 4 de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Ni un paso atrás. Palestina hoy necesita de la solidaridad y la cooperación internacional, y es ahora que debemos entregarle certezas. Palestina será libre, soberana e independiente, con las fronteras anteriores a 1967, con Jerusalén Oriental como su capital. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of the plurinational state of Bolivia, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Señora Presidenta, apoyamos la reanudación de este 10º periodo extraordinario de sesiones de emergencia de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. Cuba copatrocinó y apoyó el proyecto de resolución L30/21 que se aprobó recientemente en esta Asamblea adopted in this General Assembly to allow for the admission of the State of Palestine as a full-fledged member of the UN organization. Without further delay, we must reverse the historic injustice which has denied the Palestinian people the right to participate on an equal footing in the United Nations. It's unacceptable and shameful that the government of the United States has self-proclaimed to lead democracy worldwide is once again abusing its anti-democratic veto power to be complicit with Israel and to block the clear majority opinion of the international community. The Security Council was designed to act on behalf of the member states of the organization for the maintenance of international peace and security and not to protect hegemonic interests of the United States or the intentions of Israel. The international community cannot allow this unsustainable situation to continue. The veto power is an arbitrary power and is denied Palestine its rightful admission to the United Nations. This would be an essential step for working towards a wide, sweeping and fair and lasting solution to the Middle East problem. This calls for the true exercise by the Palestinian people of their right to self-determination and their right to build their own independent and sovereign state within pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as capital. There is no other effective way of ensuring once and for all that this spiral of violence will end so that we can save lives and set the path for peace. 104 countries have now recognized the state of Palestine, and the figure continues to rise. The state of Palestine is an active member of the international community in multilateral fora and is subject to the rights and obligations of a number of international instruments. The draft resolution which was approved gives justice because it recognizes that Palestine fulfills the conditions to be a full-fledged member of the UN. Madam President, Cuba once again calls for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the illegally occupied Palestinian territories. We call for an end to violence and to warmongering. Humanitarian aid must be provided urgently in sufficient amounts for the Palestinian people. We must put an end to the forced displacement of the Palestinian people. They have a right to live there. We firmly condemn the killing of civilians, in particular women, children, and humanitarian workers from the UN system. The indiscriminate shelling against the people in Gaza and the destruction of housing, civilian infrastructure and hospitals, as well as the denial of basic services for the people, have further worsened the precarious humanitarian situation as a result of the blockade on the Gaza Strip and flagrantly violate international humanitarian law. Nothing can justify such actions. This is a collective punishment and is a war crime and crime against humanity. Those who are opposed for various pretexts to a ceasefire should bear the responsibility for the serious fallout. Every day, more innocent lives are lost. We must not remain indifferent. Cuba is not indifferent. We remain committed to the Palestinian cause, and Cuba will continue to contribute to the best of its ability to legitimate international efforts to put an end to these atrocities suffered by the sisterly Palestinian people. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba, and I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iraq.